Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to another Power Trio podcast. Today, we're carrying on from last episode with our run through of Nick Cave with Wes and Chance. Say hi, guys.
So,
Hey. So, today, we're just going to carry on from where we left off last time. We were running through Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds discography. We ran through their first 9 albums, and today, we're going to go over the next 8, I believe. Is it 8?
got so many.
I think so.
Yeah, it's 8. So should we just jump?
17.
Should we just jump right in?
Yeah.
I mean, we're
Okay,
right
so the
into
next
it,
album
but
we're going to be talking about is 1997's The Boatman's Call, which was
nice,
actually,
good year.
yeah, it was only a year after Murder Ballads, I believe.
Yeah, which is surprising because this is, yeah, I would say maybe the biggest shift between albums in
Yeah,
the band's career.
he goes from
Yeah.
writing murder ballads to love ballads all on piano,
You guys?
Yeah,
with some of his biggest
like I
hits.
think I said in the last video, something to the effect of Murder Ballads kind of being the send-off to that
Yeah, that era.
Nick Cave's traditional post-punk style that he'd come up with, and that
Yeah, he goes
those
for more.
stories and narratives that have kind of cemented him as a accomplished songwriter. And now we have the Boatman's Call, which is their most stark up to that point, I would say.
Yeah, it's probably one of their biggest as well. It features biggest hits like Into My Arms and classic track People Ain't No Good from the spectacular film Shrek.
Shrek 2.
Ew.
Shrek 2 Electric Boogaloo.
And also,
There's another. Isn't there another?
Are you the one that I've been waiting for?
Is that in
Yeah.
Shrek as well?
I think it's in a show or. What,
Alright.
What's that in?
I don't actually know.
I'm not cultured enough.
But yeah, this was definitely it's a more straightforward approach for him because like we said there's not really any like character driven songs. It's more like love songs. The more
Yeah,
emotional side of Nick Cave.
And it's a more stripped down one. It's like mostly piano and other acoustic instruments.
But it
Some
definitely,
of these songs it's just piano and like bass, I think.
yeah, it definitely
Yeah,
creates a more
and
intimate experience as well.
it's definitely a critic favorite, but among circles I'm in, it seems to be a little more divisive.
I mean, I like it. It's up there with like some of his best. I mean, I
I've
used to
seen
know.
I've seen it get called boring quite a few times.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think it's where they like perfected their like knack for like mid-tempo ballads.
an old
Yeah,
friend of ours, Ava,
yeah.
had it as a 10 out of 10 for a while. Like, so
Ava,
it's
yeah, she had a 10. I think
very
she demoted
decisive.
it to a 9.
Yeah.
But another friend of ours, good old Dan, gave it like a 50 or something, like
Oh,
or
damn.
95. And he has not softened on Nick Cave since, as we'll talk about once we get to the other end of this discography. But
But yeah,
yeah, I like
Favorite
this
song?
album a lot. I like
um,
Green Eyes because it's beautiful, but also it's like this really pretty, gorgeous ballad. But it also uses the phrase shimmering. Well, this is like one of like 3 words I never like to say.
go.
I'm not gonna say it because just I don't like it. It makes me feel dirty.
I haven't heard this song in a while. What does it say? Cunt?
Yep, that's the one.
All right.
That's the one.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't
Yeah,
expecting it to be something like that because for me, there's words where it's like they're not even offensive. It's just I hate saying them.
Yeah, it's just we're
I know this
it's
is a tangent,
it's
but
less of a big deal over in England, I know, but it's still like a pretty
I mean, a
strong
word
word.
I absolutely hate to say is suckle. I fucking hate that word. It's
Oh
horrible.
yeah, that's not even like it's not even bad. It's just like
It's just it just makes no. It's-
yeah, like there's that one. I think getting off topic. I think it's used in a couple Swan songs,
oh god, yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is.
That would make
like
sense.
"Helpless Child" or something. Where he talks about drinking Michael Gira.
But
What the hell, man?
back to album
But
highlights.
anyways,
I
yeah,
feel
I
Anyway,
mean,
one
we can
that
speaking
kind
of
of,
shall we part?
one that I like from this one is Brompton Oratory, is it?
yeah, that's on there.
Yeah, track 4, because it's like it's slightly different. Like as far as I remember, there's like an electronic bit in it. Like it's not piano. I can't
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
like, and that
I
makes it
mean,
stand out. But it's still a good album. It's very cohesive. But then I
yeah,
guess
and
in the other end, it's not as adventurous as we'd like Nick Cave to be.
Yeah.
in some regards, yeah, it's a much more traditional singer-songwriter album. But I think that's
If
like
if this
when
were
you go
like
into the
any other artist,
context.
if this were any other artist, it'd probably just be like kind of a boring detour. But I
It's
think
it's
Nick
kind of a
Cave,
testament to his songwriting ability, I think.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
Um, but because it's this is where his work started taking a turn for the personal.
Yes.
Because up until this, he didn't really write as straightforward. Even when he did kind of go into his own personal emotions, like on uh the the good son. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's I think where that started really.
yeah,
Yeah.
Um, he did it in a more roundabout way through stories and other narratives. Whereas here, this is stuff like Into My Arms. It's pretty. It's straight from him, really.
Yeah.
And I
yeah.
think from what I've read, that's because I think in between this and Murder Ballads, he broke up with his then longtime girlfriend PJ Harvey.
All right.
Or
Yeah,
I mean, he didn't break up with her. Apparently, she dumped him.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that was an influence.
So yeah, I think next up, I mean, this is an interesting part in their career because they had a 4-year break after the Boatman's Call.
Yeah, that was the longest up until that point, correct?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. They had a 4-year break until they came back in 2001 with their 11th album, No More Shall We Part. Now this
Yeah.
this one's special to me because I don't know what it was about. When I first heard this album, I was like, meh. I was indifferent, but fuck me if this isn't a grower. Like over time, this has become like top 5 or maybe even 3 Nick Cave albums for me.
Oh well, yeah.
And I
Like,
think
See,
this album like kind of starts the period where I'm least familiar with. I'd say this through Lazarus is like the part that a lot of people just kind of like skip over.
but this
which is
album in
kind of a
particular,
shame because
yeah,
this is a very good album, as Charlie was saying.
Yeah.
Like
this is
I didn't,
fantastic.
and I'd agree with it being grower. It's definitely something that I think takes a couple listens because when I first heard it, I thought it was all right. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, same with me.
Not the best, and it's still not my favorite or anything, but it I think it builds upon the Boatman's Call's foundation in a way
Yeah,
that's pretty uh, gratifying. It's
yeah,
pretty
because
satisfying
the
because it's
piano is still a dominant instrument on this album, but it brings back all the other stuff, and it also brings back his storytelling and characters. Like in the very first track, As I Sat Sadly by
yeah,
Her Side, which is about like an elderly couple and how they view the world differently to each other, and it's
yeah. It's a
sung through
it's a
them. Yeah.
beautiful opener.
Oh yeah.
It's a more like elaborate album. It's like it's got some of Cave's like more straightforward writing. Also, it's like less
Yeah,
obscure,
Yeah,
and he
but
uses like more of his range.
and then yeah, he
yeah,
uses his voice a lot more on this one. And then you've got another character-driven song in Hallelujah, which from the
yeah,
lyrics sounds like almost a mental patient, like going out for the day without his carer and just seeing the world.
yeah. I was listening to that earlier today, and I was really paying attention to the lyrics. I was like, I didn't. It was kind of a weird contrast with that narrative, and then you have these Hallelujah, the chorus of Hallelujah. It was kind of
Yeah. And then you
an
got the
interesting
more, like
juxtaposition.
you said, Chance, you got the more straightforward songwriting on songs like Love Letter.
Yeah. Now
Which
I
I love
actually want to
Love Letter.
hear. I want to hear Nick Cave cover "Hallelujah" by Leonard Cohen. Now that I think
They'd
about it.
probably. I would imagine it would kind of sound similar to the original version, the Leonard Cohen version.
Yeah.
Because looking back, I think that you could actually draw a lot of comparisons to Cohen and Nick Cave.
Oh, definitely. I want like crazy post to do it.
And I don't think we can talk about this album without talking about the best misheard lyric in Nick Cave's discography in "Sweetheart Come."
Uh,
Sweetheart come, sweetheart come.
it's definitely a fun. It's
It
definitely a
threw
fun
me
song
when I
for
first
playing
heard it.
the song game where you just put a simple "in my ass" after the title of the song.
Yeah.
It's just like the first time I heard it, it threw me. Like, because I was listening to the song, I looked at the title, I was like, "Oh, Sweetheart Come." That's the like, that's a Nick Cave title. And then when he sung it, I was like,
It's
"What?"
like one of those things where you know it's not what he's saying.
Yeah, but it's
You don't
so
have to
hard
check.
not to hear it.
Because it is Nick Cave, and honestly,
This
it
is the
wouldn't
man that
surprise me.
did Stagger Lee.
And then I think
Yeah, like 10 years ago, this might have that might have been that would have seemed completely appropriate, like on Murder Ballads or anything from the 80s. I would have been like, oh yeah, absolutely. But yeah, on No More Shall Part, I had to double check.
But then I went on YouTube to see if like anyone else had noticed it, and like this is where you realize there's two kinds of people in the world, because someone commented it and then someone just replied saying, "Oh, so it's so immature people these days." But this album's full of highlights for me. Because you've got
Yeah.
probably Cave's, my favorite Nick Cave single in 15 Feet of Pure White Snow. That's a
Oh, yeah, I really
brilliant
like-
song.
Yeah, that one's great. I love the way the moments where it just kind of escalates.
Yeah.
It has a really nice build, and then it kind of crashes down, and then it gets back up there again, and it's a really
You've got songs like oh, sorry, were you finished?
yeah, I was pretty much done.
You got songs like "God Is in the House," where it's like a observation of organized religion in like closed off communities.
Yeah.
Which is like, I love the bit at the end where he like drags out the pre-chorus like to the point where he's like straining his voice in a whisper. That bit, yes. And then you've got another highlight, "Oh My Lord." That's just a brilliant song through and through, and the way it builds
My
throughout.
favorite song on here is "Sorrowful Wife."
Oh, the unexpected like explosion in that song.
Yeah.
You don't expect it to go where it goes, especially when you hear it from the beginning.
Yeah, it starts out very it's kind of sweet. A little melancholy, but it's similar to the opener in that it seems like it's talking about kind of an older couple, and then it takes a turn for the tragic where he's just saying like, "Help me, I was blind," and stuff like that. So it's
Yeah,
very,
and like the instruments just
moving
go
song.
full on. And then obviously the closer in "Darker with the Day." My God, one of my favorite like piano chord progressions ever. It's just such an emotional. The first time I heard it, I was walking to my girlfriend's house, and I literally had to stop walking and just be like, "Fucking wow!" I was blown away when I heard that song.
Wow, yeah.
It's fantastic. It's one of those moments where I was like, Nick Cave is a genius.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't love this record quite as much as you do. I'm not quite. Again, it might be a question of familiarity, but I still do think that it's a great record.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it is a little long. Like.
Yeah, it is long, because the amount of
Two,
times.
one or two of the songs do, I think, overstay their welcome.
Yeah.
Overall, it's pretty.
Yeah.
It's amazing that Nick Cave got 10 albums into his career and he didn't have a miss, which I think brings us to
his 12th
Nocturama.
studio album, 2003's Nocturama.
Sorry, I meant 11. So this is Nocturama's 12.
Yeah, Nocturama's 12. This
Okay,
is really, I mean,
This
unanimously
album-
the only dud in his career.
Yeah, this album I don't think is like that bad, but its biggest problem is that it's like kind of uninteresting.
It's sort of
The
Yeah,
like
only
he
like
basically
the
tried to
only
make.
massively noteworthy things about it is that it's the last album, Blixa, and has the return of Nick Lonnie or something. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
yeah.
I
The
mean,
thing
it's
about Nocturama is that it just doesn't feel like anything. It doesn't feel like anything new.
it feels like he
And
tried
then
to make No More Showy Part number 2, but made it worse.
yeah, and it's yeah, like you said, it's not bad. It's just
Yeah, it's just
it's
like
you're
It's
kind
just
of
kind of
overwhelmed.
what it's just there.
there's songs that you wouldn't go back to, like just She Passed By My Window, Rock
I
of
think
Gibraltar.
it opens pretty strongly. I was
Yeah,
kind of
Wonderful
optimistic
Life
when
is
I
a good
started the
opener.
record. I was like, oh, this is actually pretty
And
good.
we talked about songs overstaying their welcome with the last album, but then there's Babe I'm on Fire, the closer on
Yeah,
this, which is 14
It's
minutes of the same
definitely not
thing.
O'Malley's bar.
Yeah, it doesn't really
no,
go anywhere, this song, and it's 14 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, the
yeah. For
bass
the
line's
first
pretty
two, you're
cool,
like, oh, this is cool. For the first two, you're like, oh, this is cool. This is kind of a rager, and you expect it to kind of change,
but it doesn't.
and it just kind of doesn't.
Yeah.
It just goes on and
It,
on.
yeah, it yeah, as we said, overstays its welcome
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
this is the
sure.
first Nick Cave album I think I listened to where afterwards I came away from it thinking there wasn't really any songs that stuck with me.
No,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, and yeah,
The only thing I
I
can
can't
remember is
remember one
Wonderful
that I.
Life. I think that's the best song, the opener.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
I
it's
mean,
it's
there's not really much else
it's
to
a
say.
pretty little opener, but yeah, I guess that's the biggest condemnation you can give it. Really,
I
is
mean,
just not. There's not much to say about it.
if you're going to listen to Nick Cave's discography, you should still listen to this album because it's still like a piece of his career that you need to listen to understand him. But
It feels way more like a footnote than a landmark.
yeah, definitely. But then he kind of made up for that 1 year later in 2004 when he
Yeah, one
released
year
his
later.
13th studio album, a double studio album titled Abattoir Blues / The Lyre of Orpheus.
Which kind of makes me wonder. Maybe like Nocturama was just a stopgap. He was like, all right, we're gonna put this out, and then while we finish the
Yeah.
actual thing we're
So this thing is
really working on.
a bit of a monster. I mean,
They
it's
like
not really.
immediately got back on track. Or
Yeah,
Yeah,
Nocturama.
it
Kind of
immediately
impressive
picks
because
up the
most bands can't
quality.
do that,
Picks the quality
yeah,
right back up.
especially with like
yeah.
a big double album.
Nocturama got pretty. It didn't get panned, but people were like, "Oh man, is Nick Cave? Is he starting to fall off finally?" And then
And then
listening
they
like a
got
year later, and they're
slapped
like,
in the
"Oh no,
face
he's all good,
with this. Let's
still there."
split it into two parts then. Let's talk about because they're like both the discs are named like one's Abattoir Blues, one's The Lyre of
Yeah,
Orpheus. So let's
They're
talk
both pretty
about
different.
Abattoir
I think I
Blues
prefer
first.
Blues. Abattoir Blues is the livelier of the two, I
Yeah,
would
because
say.
it starts off
Yeah.
with this punchy. As soon as you hear like the opening drum roll of "Get Ready for Love," it's like oh, and then like the riff
Yeah,
comes in and there's like fucking a choir in the background. It's like oh,
Oh, he's
yeah,
back.
it's a really great moment, and yeah, the choir on Abattoir Blues mainly, it's like kind of gospel tinged
yeah.
post punk a little bit,
Yeah.
And
and
then
it's a really fun listen.
you get the characters again, the character stories with things like Cannibal's Hymn and Hiding All Away.
The first of which I love the climax, the explosion of Cannibal's Hymn. It's really it took me like 2 or 3 listens to kind of like actually for that to grab me, but when it did, I was like, oh my goodness, how did I not notice this before?
Yeah. And then you've got like other little songs. There's I mean, the title track for this disc, Abattoir Blues, again, that's again one of my favorite Nick Cave tracks. It's quite a more emotional one, like because this is the more punchy disc, but this song's slower and it's got those big piano chords playing throughout.
Yeah, they're interconnected. It's not like one is a completely energetic album and then the other one is like this somber. No, they're connected and they're um, cohesive on their own.
Yeah,
They're not one's not boring or anything, but
But disc 2 is definitely like kind of a slower, less
yeah, it's a
punchy.
little more mid-tempo. Which correct me, does it starts with the Lyre of Orpheus, right?
the Lyre of Orpheus begins with the Lyre of Orpheus, which is a crazy song, like lyrically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he got the myth of Orpheus a little twisted.
Just a little bit.
Because in traditional Greek mythology, and my nerd is going to show here, like Orpheus was a musician who played the lyre, obviously, and he was getting married to the love of his life, Eurydice, and and she got bitten by a snake and died. And then and then he was mournful, and he found a way to go into the underworld, and he played so beautifully that Hades was like, okay, you can have her, you can bring her back to the land of the living, but you can't look at her until you get up out of the underworld. And halfway up the stairs, he thought Hades had tricked him, and he looked back, and she had to disappear. And then he was killed by a bunch of crazy
Yeah.
nymphs or whatever.
I mean, I guess it's kind of fitting because
Um,
I first
True.
listened to this album all the way through when I was on holiday in Greece like a month ago.
yeah,
So I was in the right place.
that'd be a great place to listen to this.
Yeah, I did. I listened to it while sunbathing on the beach. I listened to the whole
Not
double album.
necessarily what I pictured, but yeah.
But yeah, this
Yeah.
the second disc as well, it's got good songs again. Easy Money is one that I like, and it ends off
Yeah,
with Oh Children.
Breathless.
I like
Breathless
I
is a
like
good one.
Supernaturally quite a bit.
Yeah, and another movie thing for
Correct me if
Nick
I'm wrong.
Cave.
That's the one that has like kind of an acoustic guitar
Yeah,
leading it throughout. It actually gives it a bit of a pep to it, and I
yeah.
enjoyed it. It was a change of pace because a lot of these are mid tempo, and I think it's one of the
And
kind of brisker cuts.
once again, Nick Cave got another song in a film. Oh Children was in one of the Harry Potter films.
Yeah.
Oh
That
yeah,
explains why it's one of the bigger ones, I guess. It's
Yeah,
got the most streams.
isn't
it's definitely Hallows Part 1 it's in.
is it? No.
I don't know where it is in the film because I've watched it and I've never heard Oh Children.
Oh,
It might be.
there's a scene where Harry and Hermione are dancing in like a tent. That's absolutely not in the books, but
They
I
did it
think
for Nick
that's what it is.
Cave.
What's the Harry Potter movie with Ian Brown?
Oh,
That's I think that's a Goblet of
Oh my
Fire
God.
has,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like at the Yule Ball, there are people playing, and I think Johnny Greenwood is one of them, or it might be Johnny and Colin. Like there's members of Radiohead, I think, in Harry Potter, which I think is really fun. I think
why
it's
not?
hilarious, actually.
But yeah, this is it's definitely a much. You can tell he put a lot into this album because even the artwork as well is like a lot more mature and like because even with
Yeah.
I feel like some people style of artwork, but I love it's
I
kind
love
of the
this
My
one.
Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy like solid solid background with a square picture.
Oh, I want somebody to edit that.
My Beautiful Dark
Like
Twisted Orpheus.
the picture of Kanye having sex, or the
Yeah, the Kanye picture of in the Nick Cave one.
okay, that one is a little funnier.
Oh damn.
That one would be pretty interesting. But yeah, are we done with this one? Or are we
I think so.
ready to go on?
Yeah. So let's. There was
More
another
discs.
4-year gap in his career here. We move forward to 2008 when, sticking with the Greek theme, he released album 14, Dig Lazarus Dig.
Lazarus is like a Jewish
Well, also
name.
around this time, he had his side project Grinder Man, so that's why
Oh
there's more
yeah.
of a gap for this one.
Oh yeah, no,
So
Lazarus is
Yeah,
the
and it
because
also
of
kind
that,
of
Lazarus
it
is to do
affected the
with
song too.
Christians.
yeah,
Jesus or
and I
something.
think Chance, you've described this as Nick Cave's last fun album.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
At least it doesn't seem like we're getting anything like this again.
Yeah,
No.
especially in light of events that we'll talk about when we get to
Unless the
later.
third Grinder Man album gets him back in that mood, 'cause I think they're working on that.
Yeah, but this is
Would we count that?
I don't know. I mean, maybe if he makes a third Grinder Man album and then goes back to the Bad Seeds, maybe he'll be in a better mood and we might get another one like this. I don't know.
I mean, with
Yeah.
this
Now that
one,
this whole like ambient trilogy is over.
this
So Dig Lazarus Dig, in case you hadn't inferred from our talking around it, is a bit of a. It's kind of. I would say it's maybe the most meat and potatoes Nick Cave album, at least within the 21st century.
I mean, I didn't enjoy it as much as Abattoir Blues, but it's
me neither.
I love its title.
yeah, the title track's great. It's like a bit punchy. It's fun. It's got a nice chord
Catchy.
chord progression thing going on, and yeah, it's catchy as well.
And it's got a. I like the album cover on this one. It's simple.
Ah, now you see, you remember in the last episode I mentioned how I thought Henry's Dream might be a concept album?
Yes.
I feel the same with this one because it's like it's up in like almost stage lighting, like it's in a theater show or something.
Yeah.
Ah.
See, it makes me think again, is this a but then the whole like Lazarus story just happens in the first track, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know. This album doesn't really grab me all that much. I think it's solid.
I
But
don't know
Yeah,
if
it's
it's more
got
of a concept album, but the songs are definitely back to like the whole story driven.
yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
got there's fun tracks and there's slower tracks on this one again.
More
Like
News from
there's
Nowhere is a great song.
oh
The title track.
man, I was gonna get onto that, but yeah, my definitely my favorite from this is More News from Nowhere. That's the one that has the Greek stuff because it's like the Odysseus story.
Oh yeah, because Odysseus, yeah, he tricked a Cyclops by saying that his name was
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah, and he says that in the song. But that's the thing I love about this song. I love like the guitar tones and the chorus is great where he's like it's getting strange in here. That's like I love that bit. And just yeah,
Such a Nick Cave
it's
kind of
definitely
line.
definitely the best track on the album by like a country mile for me because I was sort of getting
I
bored
do
with
like
it towards the end and then More News
Albert
from
Goes
Nowhere.
West. I think that one has a like kind of this wall of sound, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I thought was really cool, and I like the That's kind of where I think this album is best. When with the 3 exclamation points, you hope that the album's lively.
But then
Yeah.
it does have slower points like Night of the Lotus Eaters.
Right.
That's definitely a slower one here. And then it's got more straightforward ones too, like Lie Down Here and Be My Girl.
Today's Lesson is a good song. Too.
Yeah, today's lesson's got a groovy bass line.
Yeah.
But I mean,
that's kind of it with this one, I guess.
yeah, it's kind of
Yeah, this
you know,
this is maybe the Nick Cave album I have the least to say about,
yeah,
excluding Nocturama.
because it just sort of this
Um,
album just it is what it is sort of thing. Like it's fun.
Yeah,
You can take it or leave it.
and in a lot of cases I'll take it. But like,
I feel like if you listen to this album first from Nick Cave, you wouldn't like it. But with the context of his other you need the context of his other albums to like get satisfied by this album.
yeah, there's a lot of Nick Caveisms on there, so that if you're like a longtime fan, you'll be like, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that.
So now I think we do enter the biggest gap so far between albums in his career, which was 5 years. This one, and now we enter what we call
with
the
another Grinder Man album in between, actually.
yeah, with what we call the trilogy period. This most because Nick Cave said these most recent 3 albums were
Nick
a trilogy.
Cave gets sad.
So on this 15th studio album in 2013, we had Push the Sky Away.
This was actually my first. This was my first Nick Cave album because it was the only one that was on Prime at the time. Well, this and Skeleton Tree, but I listened to this one first, so it has like a really special place for me.
Yeah, I think.
But musically, it's like a pretty interesting album because it's probably one of their most simplistic.
Yeah,
ones.
it's very stripped back. I think this is the one out of this trilogy.
More electronic too.
This is the one out of this
That's
trilogy I've listened to most, actually. Because
well, for reasons we'll specify later, it's kind of the easiest listen.
Yeah. I mean, We Know Who You Are is a great opener.
Yeah, I noticed that last time I listened to it. I like that a lot, but I think
The two
I
best
think like
songs on this are hands down Jubilee Street and Higgs Boson
Oh
Blues.
yeah, hands
for
down.
me, I think Jubilee Street starts a like 3 song run that I think is just easily the best on the album, which is
Yeah,
Jubilee Street, Mermaids, and We Real Cool.
Mermaids is a brilliant
Yeah.
track as well. Gotta
Yeah,
say
He
that.
really
Mermaids.
likes
I think.
Mermaids.
Hmm?
Nick Cave really likes Mermaids.
Yeah, Mermaids is a
Mentions
good
them a lot.
song.
Who doesn't? Um, that's something he shares with Frank Ocean apparently.
But yeah,
I want to collab.
Higgs Boson Blues is the longest on this album, and it's a trip. Like it's a real emotive like trip with those
That's the
backing
song that like name
vocals.
drops Miley Cyrus, right?
Yeah, and Hannah Montana does the African
Yeah.
Savannah.
It's like such a weird like album lyrically.
Yeah, it's because I actually researched the song after I heard that line because I was like, well, what the hell is this about? And it's just about like
Him googling shit.
yeah, it's about people playing with the God particle and like the Higgs boson in the Large Hadron Collider, which is why he says he's going to Geneva in the song. So it's people playing God because he says like Hannah Montana does the African Savannah as the simulated rainy season begins, so like controlling the weather and all that shit. Basically,
Yeah, it's
playing
kind of weird.
God is the message of the
It's
song.
almost like Nick Cave stepping into the 21st century
Yeah, definitely.
because
But I
a lot
love
of his
that.
songs have sort of a classic archaic vibe, but you have
Mhm.
that, and then you have We Real Cool, where he's like, We Real Cool. It's like,
And then
doesn't
It's
seem
like
like something
the
Nick Cave would say.
the
the
title
way
track.
We Know Who You Are is kind of spelled like an Arctic Monkeys song
Yeah.
Yeah,
around this time.
And the
same here.
title track is a good way to lead the album out because it's one of the most stripped down songs I think.
Mhm.
And I do like it's definitely a favorite of mine from this.
Mhm.
I just love
Yeah.
the repeated what is it? It's completely slipped my mind now.
I
The,
would say this is the most, from this ambient trilogy, this one does seem to be the most, somehow the most energetic.
yeah, it definitely is
Yeah,
because it's
for
got the
what
most going on like
And because
instrumentally.
there's a few, like Jubilee Street and Mermaids do have a bit of kind of more traditional instrumentation. Um, but uh, the other two in this trilogy, the ones we're about to get to, which I can't wait to get to, but also dread talking about, uh,
they
are
definitely get more
much.
simplistic as they go along.
Yeah.
Well,
They
I don't know.
they all kind of get more like stripped back with
Right.
the album.
I can tell we're excited, so we're going to move on. But before we hit the next album, we have to give some context, which was in the year 2015, Nick Cave's 14-year-old son Arthur,
15.
15? Yeah, 15-year-old son
Yeah.
Arthur died falling off of a cliff in near Brighton in England. And
Yeah,
a year later, he released his next album, Skeleton Tree.
So just when you thought Nick Cave couldn't possibly get any sadder,
It gets
he does it.
real sad. This is a
and
heavy album because it's still.
from what I understand, Skeleton Tree was mostly written by the time Arthur
Yeah.
had died.
Some of the
But
lyrics were like changed.
yeah, they were kind of changed to kind of fit a little more.
A
But you
theme.
can tell that this is something recorded in the face of like immeasurable grief.
It's
Um,
yeah, and
I
I
always
know
thought it was
it's
an interesting parallel that this and that Skeleton Tree and Black Star came out in the same year because I think you can draw a lot of comparisons between the two.
Yeah, more like avant-garde.
Yeah, and I thought honestly, I was surprised that Ghosteen. I thought Skeleton Tree might be Nick Cave's last record. I don't think anyone would blame him.
yeah,
I wouldn't blame him, but I didn't really see it being the last. Cause like I still get the sense that he loves making albums.
Yeah, and it is obviously this album is nothing if not a purge of just it's it's kind of Nick Cave openly bleeding.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I
And I think
think
this marked a time in his career where he kind of opened up in general to the public.
yeah, he
Um,
did. This
and
I think this is such a deep and thought-provoking album in terms of the way it sounds and its lyrics that we should, because it's only an 8-track album, we should just very briefly go over each song because I think each song here is a standout.
Jesus Alone
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
just such.
the opener, as soon as you hear that
it's
beginning,
it's
that's
hard to hear that stark synthesizer and weird bass. Is that what is that? Is that
I
a
mean,
bass
and there's that like
sound?
echo, that noise in the background that's going like wee.
I was watching
Yeah.
like like an in-studio performance of it. I think it's a guitar. He's like fucking around with some pedals, I think.
But
It
it's
creates like that drone.
he talks about it opens with the line
You fell from the
I don't know
sky.
if I'm quoting it exactly. You fell from the sky and crash landed near the river Ader.
I mean, that's
Um,
just given the way we said how his son died. I mean,
it immediately hurts, and the way Nick Cave says the refrain, nothing on there's nothing on this album that's a chorus.
No.
There's nothing catchy. There's nothing fun on this album. It is all you have refrains and repeated lines.
I mean, even the album
The
cover's
reason
just
they're repeated
black.
is to like make you sadder.
It's like
And
you're
he just
standing
says-
out in the rain without an umbrella, then somebody punches you in the gut and steals your wallet.
And it's
Yeah.
nighttime.
He says, "With my voice, I am calling you." And then, like in the verses, he kind of imagines all these like horrific careers or occupations or places where someone could end up, and you kind of get the sense that he's imagining these horrific futures for his son, and even though they're terrible, he's mourning them because his son never got the chance to live.
But also on the flip side, there's juxtaposition just in the second line where he talks about new life because he says flowers spring from the ground and lambs burst from the wombs of their mothers. So it's like with death becomes more life. The cycle.
Yeah, and it's just
It's him almost trying to come to terms with what's happened, saying there must be a reason.
it's Skeleton Tree, if nothing else, is the sound of an artist shaken, especially someone like Nick Cave, who basically based his career off of profiting off death because of his songs. So it's now that he's actually faced with it in his own life, you could imagine he'd have something to say about it.
Yeah. And then I think it gets the mood gets flipped on its head with the second song, Rings of Saturn, which I think is the happiest sounding song on the album, even though it's still not.
For what that's worth.
Yeah.
Put happiest in like
It's got lighter
17
instrumental
quotes.
tones. Yeah. And his voice, you can hear his voice shaking in this song, which is what I think is like the most emotive part of it.
Yeah.
And it is a song that's just about a sexual encounter as well. But the way he delivers it makes it emotionally sad.
Which is actually a trend, because on the next on Ghosteen, there's a song called Night Raid, which is actually about the conception of his twins, one of whom was Arthur.
Right.
The son loves listening to that song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Anything else to say about Rings of Saturn?
I will say this and Girl and Amber both kind of, with the title Rings of Saturn and Girl and Amber, there's sort of this idea of spinning.
Yeah.
Which also comes back on Ghosteen later. But it's kind of the focal point of many of the verses on Girl and Amber, which is very I would say it's one of two songs on this album that have kind of brought me to tears before.
Yeah.
Girl and Amber is a heavy sounding song, and I would I'll let one of you talk about it too.
The only ones I really have anything to say about S3, because it's been a while since I've heard this, so like a lot of the songs aren't really like fresh in my mind. But the last three, I'll definitely have something to say about.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
so
I don't blame you.
Magneto,
This is not an easy album to listen to.
yeah,
This is not something you go into and be like,
It's
I
not
think I'll
something.
listen to Skeleton Tree today. That sounds like a good time.
Yeah, it's not something I'm like humming to myself while I'm saying. It's like
Yeah,
I'm
you're
yeah.
nothing
like in the
super
middle of,
hooky about it.
I
you're
mean,
like at work and you're like, you wanna be.
Magneto's another good one. It's where the title of the documentary film came from, One More Time with Feeling, which you should watch.
Yeah,
Anyone listening, watch that documentary. Jesus, it's heavy.
Yes.
I actually haven't seen it.
Yeah, it goes through the making of Skeleton Tree,
Yeah, I've read about it, but
and
I
I
haven't
saw a
actually
bit of it
gotten
on the
into watching
TV,
it.
and man, it's like Nick is so hard on himself during the recording process.
Just like trying to get everything perfect, or
Yeah,
just he's kind of just a wreck
where
in
he's just
general.
like, he'll do a take and he's like, I sound shit. Like,
Yeah,
and I don't know how to
I
reach
think
this
like
certain note and all this, and it's like, you can see he's just in despair with it all.
yeah, Skeleton Tree definitely. It seems like his way of just kind of distracting himself, like trying to put all of himself into music because he doesn't know what else to do. What
Yeah.
else would he do?
And then
Um,
Anthracene has an interesting percussion like guiding it through. It's quite fast.
Mhm.
That's all I
right.
really remember about Anthracene. But again, that's another
Yeah,
good
it's kind of
song.
got a whirling feeling to it.
All right, and now into the last three songs, which kicks off with track 6, "I Need You."
Oh my
I
god.
need you is fucking heavy because it
Yeah,
sounds like Cave's pretty much on the verge of tears the entire. Like
Yeah,
the
that song.
shakiness in his voice during that chorus. The
It's
saddest
oh my. Jeez, I can't take that song
thing.
on an emotional level.
I think
I mentioned Girl and Amber and one other song being the ones that like brought me to the verge of tears. This is the other one.
I almost think it was brave of him to release this one as a single.
I mean, it's kind of the most accessible
Yeah, because it's got like
in
all
a
the
way,
instrumentation there.
but like, yeah, it's still just
And then that goes on to Distant Sky.
The last two songs on the album are my favorites. Distant Sky is probably one of the most
Uh, the
beautiful things he's
the
ever
title
recorded.
track is my favorite from this, but Distant Sky, yeah, it's got a
I would say I Need You is mine.
yeah,
Yeah,
Distant
that song.
Sky is the most ambient on here.
Who's the girl on Distant Sky?
Yeah, I don't know who it is
Her
either.
voice is what absolutely makes that song. I think
There is a woman,
She
but
has a very European sounding name, like something
Elsa
hard to
Elsa
pronounce.
Torp.
Yep,
I
I
got
thought
the
it was
Wikipedia
Elsa.
page pulled up.
Haha, coming in clutch. Yeah, Elsa Torp. Elsa Torp. Elsa spelled E-L-S-E.
all right.
Like the song itself, like with Cave, it's a good song, and then when she comes in, it like oh,
Yeah, it's
And I really want
this is
to,
and it's his live EP. Um, the title comes from this song.
yeah.
yeah,
Which that live version's great too. So are like all the others, like the
and
Mercy Seat and
I'm
Blue
excited
Suite.
to get onto the final track on this album, which this one has
I,
brought me to tears.
I love the acoustic guitar on the
This
title
is
track.
I almost want to discuss the
Yeah.
lyrics because I mean it's the most hopeful sounding song on the album, I think. And
Yeah,
I mean, if
it
he ended his
ends the album
career,
on a somewhat optimistic.
I feel if this was his last album, like this being the last song on his last album would have been like a perfect way to close. And it comes back round with
Right.
Jesus Alone as well, because in that one he says, "With my voice I'm calling you," and then in this song he says, "And I call out across the sea."
Yeah.
And again, seeing cliffs, it's like he's calling out to his son. But I want to know
Is it
what is a skeleton tree?
I think it's. I looked it up. I think it's just a tree without leaves.
Oh yeah, because he's
That's
a
the
Yeah.
term.
Sunday morning skeleton tree,
Nothing is free.
like candles
I
in the
mean, either that or
window.
it's just a very harrowing piece of imagery.
Yeah, I
Yeah, because
mean,
he
none
sets
of
the
the
scene of
lyrics on
like
this
a
album really make a whole lot of sense.
he sets the scene of like a winter night because he says like the skeleton tree, a candle in a window, and a jittery TV, like a winter night sat inside, like almost with his thoughts, like
Yeah, I
nothing
think
is for
like
free and all that.
because I think this trilogy, but especially starting with Skeleton Tree, brought along with it a different approach to songwriting with Nick. I
Yeah,
think it's
because
more
most
direct.
obscure.
It's more direct as far as like the prose. It's less complex, but it's also some of his naughtiest and most um, by naughty I mean KN um, and most you have to read into it pretty
Yeah,
heavily.
and
Yeah,
He's not feeding you the meaning on a silver platter. They're not straightforward narratives. It's very poetic and very
a lot of it's
uh
improvised too, I think.
yeah.
yeah, just to wrap up on Skeleton Tree because we've been talking about it for a while, and we need to move on. But it is one that needs to be talked about, which is why. But I think one last interesting thing to note is that in his late career, this is one of the shortest albums that he made, which almost makes it like he just
Yeah,
wanted
it's only
to,
like 39 minutes.
yeah, he just wanted to
I think it
wrap
is
it
the
up
shortest, is it not?
and didn't want
It
to.
might be.
Yeah, it's like he just wanted to wrap it up and didn't want to confront it too much and just here's this little package of how I'm feeling, just listen to it, sort of thing.
I mean, I don't think listeners could take much more.
Literally,
Um,
Yeah, I
because
but
think this is
I,
the shortest. The first Born is Dead beats it by like a.
but yeah, one thing I wanted to say something about Distant Sky.
yeah,
Um, it and it kind of segues into Ghosteen. I think Elsa Torp sings about their children rising.
ah,
Um, and
into
there's
the
a few times
sun.
that children are mentioned on this album, fittingly, and on Ghosteen.
Yeah,
Um,
so there was another three
but this
years.
specific metaphor of children rising or climbing comes back on the track on Ghosteen, Sun Forest,
Yes.
in the quote unquote chorus.
And we keep
Um,
mentioning it, so let's just go forward. So there was another three
yeah,
years. People
that
thought,
was my segue.
yeah,
That
people
was
thought
my
Skeleton
segue.
Tree was going to be his last album, but then this year, in fact, just like about a month ago,
Yeah,
nearly
less than a month ago.
less than a month ago, he released his latest album, 17th album, Ghosteen.
Which,
Another double album.
Another
which
double album, yeah.
if you associate with me online, you know that I'm quite fond of.
Yeah, you 10 out of 10s this one.
Yeah,
I'm still not sure
This
where I
is
sit with it, but it's the most ambient. There's like no
this might
percussion
be
here.
his most critically acclaimed album.
Yes, it
Judging
got
by like the
extremely high critic scores.
yeah.
like there's
It's
6 perfect scores.
Man.
it's just it's everything. It's kind of it's sister album. I know that this Skeleton Tree and Push the Sky Away are all part of a trilogy, but this and Skeleton Tree just seems so connected to me. Um, because Skeleton Tree is that initial gut reaction to grief and loss, whereas this one is sort of where you can tell that Nick is learning to live with the absence of his son, which is something as a person who has experienced loss, or especially loss that feels like it was too soon, uh, just really hit me.
Yeah.
Um, I think it reflects its cover art pretty well.
Yeah, it's the
Um,
complete opposite to Skeleton Tree. Skeleton Tree was just black, like darkness, but this one depicts almost heaven. It's paradise with unicorns, like parrots,
is
rainforest.
that a unicorn or
Yeah,
just a
there's a
horse?
unicorn.
It's a
It's a
unicorn.
unicorn, and there's a lion as well.
Nice.
So it's
There's
almost
like this
like
little
a
lamb,
yeah depiction
and
of heaven.
yeah, it's
It's
a
like
heavy album and it's a long album, but it's not.
it's
It
more
doesn't
optimistic than Skeleton
overstay
Tree.
its welcome, and it's just this beautiful statement that I can't get over. No matter how many times I like listen to it or think about it,
Yeah,
I'm kind of just in awe.
and there's
Um,
all the imagery of
Probably the most stripped back thing they've ever done too.
yeah. There's
I
like
don't know.
barely any percussion on the first disc.
I would say maybe ambient, maybe the most ambient, but I would say it's a little more. It's a little busier than Skeleton Tree was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And there's a lot
Because
of that.
there's a lot of synthesizers and background noise that kind of fills the space. It's not necessarily um, percussion or anything, but there's backing vocals too. Like the songs Bright Horses and Sun Forest especially have these just gorgeous um, choirs that support that back cave up. I was talking about Sun Forest earlier. I think the moment on this album that just floors me every time I hear it is in Sun Forest at around the 3 minute mark. Um, Nick talks about he's singing about children climbing up, and it's kind of a morbid imagery, but it sounds triumphant because he's lifted by these choirs that support him.
Yeah, I know the moment. It's a
Um,
good one.
and it's sad, but like I said, there's a bit. It feels like kind of reaching towards a rising sun,
Yeah,
and continuing with that sun metaphor. This whole album just feels like finally seeing the daybreak after the longest night of your life.
that's an excellent way of putting it. Was
Hmm.
I've thought I've thought and written a lot about this album,
yeah,
and just I think it's if you go back and read the Red Hand Files, is that the
yeah,
open letter
Yeah.
series that he opened to his fans? It kind of seems like the the result of all these thoughts and things that he's been sharing with his fans in the in between this and Skeleton Tree. Um, because it is a very heavy album and it's sad and it's tragic the context of it, but it's not depressing in the way that Skeleton Tree was.
No,
no,
it's the sadness, but like I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe. It's like a more optimistic feeling of death than what Skeleton Tree is.
and then you've
Yeah,
got
it's
the second disc with the two. There's three
I
songs on
almost
the second disc
I
with
almost want to say like the party after a funeral, but like
yeah,
not
I don't know if
it,
that's
that
really
party
fit.
party is
This
still not the word,
yeah,
but well, there's a specific
the
quote from
smiling
Kate
through tears.
that I'll let you say what you were gonna say, Charlie, and then I kind of wanted to wrap up my thoughts on this album
oh yeah.
with a quote that Nick Cave said.
I was gonna say about the on the second disc. There's two really long tracks that
Hmm.
we haven't seen a long song from him since like Nocturama, and then he drops two over 10 minutes on this album.
And they're both good.
And
Unlike
yeah,
Ghosteen
Nocturama.
and
Hollywood
Ghosteen and
is
Hollywood,
yeah, Hollywood's brilliant.
Oh
both
yeah.
of them are. Um, Ghosteen, the title track has a moment a few minutes in where like things like it's this weird, beautifully orchestrated moment where everything rises, kind of in this spiral. You're seeing Ghosteen dances,
Yeah,
and it's oddly uplifting in a way that almost the rest of the album. It almost seems like when I heard it, I was caught off guard. I was like, this almost doesn't fit. Um, but it's just this gorgeous moment of hope. And then Hollywood closes things off with falsetto.
yeah,
Yeah.
That was something that caught me off guard on this
Well,
album
there's
twice.
doesn't the first song have like
Yeah,
falsetto?
spinning song in the last minute.
Yeah, I was like really surprised with that.
that's
Yeah,
one of my favorite
I don't think
vocal
I've ever
melodies
heard
on
Nick
the
Cave do
album.
falsetto.
The end of spinning
I
song.
mean, there's that backing vocals on Skeleton Tree. The part where it's like, with my voice, I'm calling you. Like kind of doing it in the back.
But yeah,
This is like the first time he's actually
I feel like some
explored more of
people
his range.
would almost criticize how that sounds, but because it is very shaky. But
But
I
he's
think it's
also like
fitting how
60.
fragile. Yeah, I think it's fitting how fragile he sounds.
Yeah. So what were you
Um,
gonna say to wrap it up, Wes?
well, there's I think an someone named Cynthia sent a letter or an email to Nick Cave about grief and love and how and the pain of it. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's like two full paragraphs. But I'll read the last one that I just think reading this quote and then hearing Ghosteen, everything just clicked in a way that just uh, was really moving. And starting the quote now, I feel the presence of my son all around, but he may not be there. I hear him talk to me, parent me, guide me, though he may not be there. He visits Susie in her sleep regularly, speaks to her, comforts her, but he may not be there. Dread grief trails bright phantoms in its wake. These spirits are ideas, essentially. They are our stunned imaginations reawakening after the calamity. Like ideas, these spirits speak of possibility. Follow your ideas because on the other side of the idea is change and growth and redemption. Create your spirits, call to them, will them alive, speak to them. It is their impossible and ghostly hands that draw us back to the world from which we were jettisoned, better now and unimaginably changed.
Wow. And I think with that, we can wrap ourselves up with this podcast.
Yeah, it's a heavy note, but yeah, it's just that was the moment that drove through, like, kind of cemented Nick Cave as one of my heroes. Like going
Yeah,
through
he
his
is.
discography and just like seeing his progression as a person, as an artist, is just awe inspiring. And at the same time, kind of like how, as someone who would like to attempt being a musician, it's kind of daunting. It's like, how do you
Yeah.
even begin?
I mean, I hope that our podcast here has inspired anyone listening to go and check out Nick Cave's discography because it is a
It's
treasure.
quite the journey
Yeah.
from
Oh,
Bird of
yes.
Eternity to Ghosteen.
Yeah,
So many
and,
like changes.
Last time we did a deep dive, we did like our album ranking and top 10 songs,
But,
but I'm not even going
yeah,
to attempt
there's
that
too
with
much
this.
here.
Out of like 17 albums, yeah.
But-
If we get an itch, we might do a part. No, we're not going to do a part 2.
It took so long to
Last
get
time
part
I
2
had-
together.
Yeah, last time I had notes for this one, and looking at my sheet, I just have the word "the" written down. So
But
yeah,
yeah.
those were our thoughts
I would-
on the latter half of Nick Cave's discography.
I mean, it would be cool to like talk about the birthday party and the boys next door and Grinder Man and all that. But I mean, if we ever do that, it won't be anytime soon.
Yeah,
No.
because these things take time to organize. But
Oh yeah.
thanks
Yeah,
everyone
next
for
Nick Cave album.
yeah, thanks everyone for
Yeah.
stopping by and watching, and thanks to
Yeah,
Chance for
watching and
joining
listening.
us and making Power Trio a trio on this one.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime in the
Yeah.
future.
But for now,
Yeah,
everyone,
so
yeah,
listen to Nick Cave, please.
listen to Nick Cave, do it.
Unless you're Dan, please stay away. Don't give Ghosteen a 2.
Yeah. Just stop hurting. Stop hurting us.
It's messed up.
But yeah,
messed up, bro.
with that, guys, we'll see everyone in the next podcast. Peace out, everyone.